And we're live. Jen, welcome back to the show. So great to have you here.
It is so good to be back. And like we were saying, we could talk forever and, just keep going.
So, congratulations. I like to throw awards out from time to time to my guests. You have won the award of the quickest return guest.
Woohoo! Me.
Booked after we hit stop on the last episode, which was only 19 episodes ago. So like you gotta be fresh. You're gonna be fresh in the listener's mind out there for sure.
Good. Well, I'm excited to be back and continue the conversation because it was going so well last time, but we couldn't go on forever.
No, we couldn't. So last time we were talking about leading change. And for the listener out there, if you did not hear Jen the first time, you need to go back. You need to listen to episode 168, and you can hit that by going to movingforwardleadership.com/168, leading real change. But today we're going to be talking about hiring people and hiring the right people and making sure we're set up for success, because you were just talking about it before I hit record. I told you to hit pause. So let's hit play on what you're going to talk about before. So, what's going on right now in the whole hiring world and the situ that's up?
What's interesting right now, and people were kind of starting to talk about it maybe mid 2020, knowing when we were going back to a more traditional work schedule or a traditional office, that there were going to be some changes. And the term that's being kicked out there a lot is the Great Resignation. And so what we're finding is that many people over the last year and a half have maybe decided, hey, I want to do something different with my life. I want to have, more time off, or I want to have a blended schedule, or my job changed and it's just not what I want anymore. Or there's the group of people who are working for leaders who were leading through crisis management and kind of got stuck there. And, they're just not being led in a way that feels good to them. And there is probably even 10 more things I could list. But what we're finding right now is that people are resigning from their job at a rate they've never done before. And this creates an incredible opportunity for organizations to hire new talent, but also a great opportunity for them to kind of crack the code on how to keep the talent that they don't want to lose.
Ooh, that's two different ways to go right now. So let's go with the latter first. Let's talk about keeping people, because that's got to be, the preferred, what we call in the Army, COA, course of action, i.e. option. We just kind of like to make it sound all militaristic and fancy and stuff. But it's option, right? So that's got to be the preferred one, because it takes so much time, so much money, so much effort to go out and hire people. And the reality is, the person you have right now is the known entity. You don't know who you're going to get until after the end of the process. So what are some of the best ways for organizations out there today to not lose their people with all this going on? I want changes. I don't want to have to come into the office. I want a bit more flexible work schedule, blah, 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 all these different things that the pandemic has really shaken up and really, made people think about their lives in a more holistic way.
The good news is there's a lot of options that an organization could take. And I think the first thing you want to think about is taking care of your leaders, because they're taking care of your teams and they're taking care of your business and they're taking care of your reputation. And so start there, start at the top, and really think about, how are you leading your leaders? How do your leaders need to lead in the way in which your business is today? Because it doesn't matter what business you are different today than you were a year and a half, 2 years ago. Pandemic or not, that's life, things change. So think about what you need from these people. Think about the competencies, the skills, the way of work, what is important, and really think about making sure that you're asking them to do work that's purposeful and meaningful, and that you're not asking them to do kind of that fluff work that doesn't really have a business impact. And so start there. What we're finding here and at my agency is that people are investing in their leaders like they've never done before. And I think that's fantastic, because that's a first step in keeping them, is investing in them. Then past that, really start to think about, how can you be incredibly efficient and purposeful with across the teams? And so it really starts with organizational design and stopping and saying what jobs are important, how are we going to do those jobs, and then ensure that you have the right people in those jobs because we're doing things different. A person who excelled in a job today may need to be in a different job because they'll excel even more. Someone who maybe struggled in a job 2 years ago may actually be a fantastic fit for it today. We don't know. But really taking the time and not assuming that everyone's in the right job, but finding a way to think about what do we need to do and how do we best match that. And it's almost like kind of shake it up a little bit and get people matched really well. And I think those are some of the first steps that you can take to start to think about providing people with purpose and structure and a reason to come to work every day.
I love the first part, taking care of the leaders within your organization, because it's basically a litmus test
Mhm.
of an organization. When you start seeing senior leaders, senior management, rats from a sinking ship, people
Mhm.
start shaking, scratching their head and like, okay, what's going on that I don't know here, that I'm not privy to? Why is all these senior leaders leaving? So if you take care of them, kind of reinstills confidence in, quote unquote lower ranks, or, their subordinates. But at the same time, it instills the confidence in those leaders to be able to, okay, go out and do their job, go out and take care of their people, to do those sales calls, to do that marketing plan, to go out and affect the change, or get the revenues brought in, all those things that are needed to be done to help the organization run effectively. So that was a really interesting point, one I wasn't expecting to come up.
I try to keep you surprised.
You keep me on my toes, I definitely will give you that much. But second part is I liked about changing people up and shifting around and realizing that, okay, someone, Joe there, who's not necessarily a great worker in that job today, due to either a change in the requirements of that job, may become a great worker, or if you shift them to another job, may strike the area of genius. And that's what I like to refer to it as, are we employing our people in their areas of genius?
Mhm.
Even myself personally, recently I was not. I would just shift the jobs, and before that, I was not in my area of genius, and it showed. Like, I struggled personally with it. I did the best job I could day in, day out, but it just was not the work that made me come alive, and where I, got 100% out of me.
Mhm.
Now, where I'm at now is much more in that lane where I'm like, okay, I'm into the zone of what I'm working on now. I'm in charge of a bigger team, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, okay, this is more of my area of genius. And sometimes that's all it takes. That's all it takes.
Yeah. And, putting someone in their area of genius, obviously it's fantastic for the organization, but it impacts that person at home. It impacts that person out in the community. It impacts their brain health. It impacts their physical health, their outlook on life. And so, as leaders, we're, of course, we're thinking about the business and making sure the right people and, taking care of those things. But when you take care of those things really well, those people create better communities and create better relationships around you. And so it's this beautiful cycle of I took care of them. They are better, therefore they show up better. So therefore I'm going to take care of them even more. And so you can create this cycle where people are growing in your organization from mental health, physical health, their emotional health, just by putting them in a job in which they feel good at and they feel like they can succeed. Because when you feel like you can succeed, you can do anything. You feel like you can succeed everywhere. But when you've lost your confidence in a key area of your life, you lose confidence everywhere.
100%. 100% agree with you. And I've seen it so many times with other people. And it's so true. It's just, you know what? Let's see where else we can employ such and such a
Mhm.
person. Vice, showing them the door.
Yeah.
Uh, but now let's go back. Let's dovetail back. So we talked about hiring people, keeping people in an organization. I guess, in the final thing I would wrap this up with is, for the leaders out there, you just need to have a conversation with your people. What's working for them, what's not working for them. Listen to them. If they say, hey, this is not my area of genius, the work that I'm doing right now, it's not something that makes me come alive or you can get the most out of me, then it's like, well, what would be, how would you employ within the scope of our organization or team or whatever, have these conversations. Oh, we need a bit more flexibility. Okay, how can we help you and make achieve this so that one, we don't lose you, and two, you stay a happy, healthy employee. So let's go back to the other side of the coin, i.e., empty position. Someone, they left. People leave. It happens, right? We have an empty position. We need to hire someone. Let's go hard. Let's go fast. Let's find the first person we find and put them in the chair. Right. That's the best way to do it. Right. Fill the hole right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just grab someone off the street. I'm sure we can teach them how to do it. Yeah. So the
absolutely not, she says.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do that. No, that's bad. Don't do that. But the beginning of the work is very similar, and you have to first make sure you know what this job needs. Not only understanding, I need to hire someone to be a marketing director, but how do you want them to do that job? You do a job description, it's got all those little fancy bullet points, and you check that box. But what we don't always stop and think about is, do we want someone that's innovative? So are we in a change cycle and we need innovation? Or do we feel like we're in a solid place and we need more traditional maintenance of this job? Because if you hire a super creative person who loves to shake things up, who loves innovation, but then you give them the playbook to run and they don't get to deploy that innovation, then you've hired the right skill, you haven't hired the right way of work. And, the same is true for someone who enjoys pragmatic, traditional work. And then you hire them to be your chief, innovation officer. And they're like, but what do you mean I'm going to innovate and think of things I've never thought about? Here's what I've done and it's always worked. And there are a place for both of those people. But, what work do you want them to do? And how do you want them to do that work? And that's the pieces that we have to start with when we think about hiring.
No, I really like that. What's the vision of that position really? What is it? I also like to look at in terms of capabilities, right? What capability are we trying to develop here? Are we trying, and it's kind of along the lines of what you said. Are we trying to develop a capability that's really innovative, that's going to push the ball, push the envelope, et cetera, or are we looking for a capability that is good old reliable, going to get us there day in day out, right? So what type of capability do we need? And I'm like, when we have empty roles, I'm like, okay, is the role even valid anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right.
And you have to decide. There too often the role isn't always valid. And oftentimes too, what happens is we look at a team and we're like, they're overwhelmed, they're all working a ton. And, everyone's like, oh my gosh. And we throw payroll at the problem. And instead of pausing and saying, does this team need capability development? Do we need to rework the work? Is there partnerships that aren't working, which is causing them to be backed up and overwhelmed? Or do we just throw payroll at the problem and then we just keep hiring people and the situation doesn't change? And that's a piece that we need to pause and ask ourselves about too before we just jump the gun and hire someone.
Yeah, because money fixes everything. Come on.
Money covers up a multitude of sins. That's an old retail saying from back in the day. Have great numbers and everyone ignores the rest.
Yeah, some companies haven't fared too well from that saying, I don't think.
Yeah, that's probably true. Probably
conversation for another day of ethics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I like what we're getting at. So we were talking about checking what type of first off, check and see if it's still valid. What kind of effect are you looking for? What is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for an innovation? Are you looking for steady? What is the vision for the job? So okay, we've gone through this analysis. Like okay, yes, the role is still valid. We are looking for someone who's innovative because times are changing, and we need to get we've obviously fallen behind the 8 ball. We're behind the curve. And we need to get caught up. So we know we're going to go there. What's next? Where do we go next?
Yeah. So what's next? So, now it's you put a posting up and it's crickets, right? That's usually kind of what happens. And it's important to really think about your hiring strategy. Think where your ideal client or your ideal candidate is living, breathing, where are they at? And so many times people just throw everything on LinkedIn or everything on Indeed. That's not always the best way to go to find someone really good at the job you need to hire. Think about where they are. So if you're hiring that same marketing director as our example we've been using this evening, where might they be? Go look for organizations that someone that's really talented in marketing may be associated with. Go look for conferences and events and look at who their speakers were, who their attendees were. Like, go out there and actively think about where your ideal client might be and find them. But just throwing up that same old posting and hoping you get a candidate, you go fishing every once in a while, you'll catch something. But if you get really strategic and think about where that person might be and go find them, that's where you find the real talent, because they may not be out looking at those postings, but they may definitely take a phone call from you. If you say, hey, I, noticed you were attending this marketing conference. We're looking for a marketing director. I'd love to pick your mind about who you might know, or maybe you might be interested once you hear about it. But do the work to find where that person might be.
That's a great tips for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, you need to have some form of strategy, some kind of idea of how you're going to go about this process, because hiring is a process. It's step A through step Z.
Mhm.
There's a process, but you can't just take shots in the dark, throwing a line out in the water. Yeah, like you said, you might get the fish, you might get the biggest fish in the pond, but you might also get the smallest one too. You just don't know
Yeah.
what you're going to get. So I really like your idea
Mhm.
about going out there and being seen, and really, I would even suggest showcasing your business to even attract people to come in, right? Because that's what
Mhm.
you want is people come and think, hey, I know you got no posts up there, but hey, here's my resume,
Yeah.
right? Is that not, would that not be the end goal that you would want from this hiring strategy?
Absolutely. And you want the best of the best. And if you think about going out and finding where that person may be active, chances are they're pretty good because they're committed to their career. They're out in associations, they're out in conferences. They are out there learning that industry from others and learning from others and developing themselves. And, those are the people that you probably want to hire.
For sure. So going, fishing where the fish are
Yeah.
is one component of effective hiring strategy. What are some other ones out there that you can help the leaders listening with?
So I think that we interview people completely wrong. And we talk about behavior based interview, right? That's what we've all been taught. Tell me about a time you managed a crisis, right? And so that's, how we've all been taught to hire. And years ago, I came across a book, and it's called Who, like who are you going to hire? Who, by G.H. Smart. And gosh, it's been 15 years ago that I came across it. And what I learned from that was how to find patterns in interviews, because the patterns of behavior help you figure out if this person's going to be a fit. And so I completely changed the way I interviewed. Early in my HR career, I was a full-time recruiter, and I, changed it up completely. And when I help clients today make hiring decisions, it is the way we do it. And what you do is you start early in someone's career. So the very first job you can find on their resume, and for a high-level executive, they say even go back to high school and college. And you kind of ask the same questions. What were you hired to do? What did you do? Because those are sometimes two different things. Um, what are you proud of, or what is your biggest accomplishment? What was your biggest failure? What did you learn from it? And then what took you to your next job? You run that same series of questions. And, as they answer, you can dig in and dial into like some details. But if you keep that format, what you will find is behaviors. You'll find that every single job they've ever had, they've been promoted at least once. So you're like, hey, this person comes in, works hard, and they get promoted at, the last 4 jobs they worked at. Hey, I need this person. Or you might find someone who every time you say, well, tell me what took you from that job to the next. Well, my boss, wasn't teaching me anything and I just couldn't learn anything more there. And that was the answer for the last 4 jobs. Well, chances are they're not willing to learn or they don't see value in other people. You start to see, when I had a failure, how did I approach that failure? And what did I learn from it? And did I take that knowledge to the next situation? And was my failure bigger or different? Or, could you tell how that was leveraged? And when you start to find those behaviors, that's when you really start to recognize how is someone going to show up and do the job that you're asking them to do.
I love it. I love it, especially the failure part.
Yeah.
I think that's a question we shy away from too much because it's like, ooh, I'm getting
Ooh,
vulnerable. I
yeah.
messed up. I screwed up. I don't want to
Mhm.
talk about that. I'm supposed to be boasting myself during an interview. Look at me. Look how great I am.
Yeah.
No. I screwed up hard. This is how I
Mhm.
screwed up hard. Let me tell you. You want to hear a time where I messed up? Oh yeah. Sit back, grab a coffee because it's gonna be a while.
This is going to be really good.
Yeah, you might want to take some notes because you're gonna have some fun, right? But
Yeah.
but what that does is, one, it shows the vulnerability of the
Mhm.
candidate to me.
Mhm.
But two, it's like that follow on, like, okay, what did you learn? How did you learn from it?
Yeah.
Right? Because congratulations, we're all human.
Mhm.
I mean, humans make mistakes, and I tell my people all the time, it's like, I don't care. I don't care if you make mistake.
Mhm.
What I care about is, one, not being blindsided by it if I don't need to be blindsided by it, and two is, what are you going to do differently so that this most likely won't occur again? You can never say won't occur again, but most likely will not occur again, right?
Yeah.
Because we just don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
that is where, to me, is like, okay, this is where you can tell the difference of someone's character. Is like, did they take ownership of it? Did they, learn from it? Are they changing, habits, behaviors, processes, their own little workings, whatever, depending on what the mistake was? So I think that's something we need to talk more about, not
Mhm.
less about.
The other thing that's interesting about talking about failures, you're absolutely right. We should talk about it for all those reasons. And when you talk about it with someone in an interview, the thing that I like to discover is if they struggle to think of a failure, you might think, oh, well, they're so good, they never fail. Well, if you're not failing or you haven't stepped on something and gotten a little bit of trouble, you're either focused so much on perfectionism that you don't allow yourself to mess up. You don't allow those things, which means you're maybe not allowing yourself innovation. Because if you've never failed, you've never innovative or been innovative, and they go hand in hand. So if I talk to someone and they're like, my biggest failure was, we, looked at the information, we researched it, and the marketing strategy we went with was X. What we didn't know, 30 days later, there was going to be this change in social views, and we couldn't have predicted that. And so the marketing landed flat. How we pivoted, how we changed that was this and this. But what I learned was have a plan B, or, whatever. And so then you're thinking, okay, this person's okay with innovation because they're okay with failure.
You remind me of a part of our conversation from the last episode. I brought up Kodak, and it came back up again
Yeah.
because I remember listening to Jeffrey Hazlett, and he was talking about how they were running an ad campaign for Kodak and Kodak Inc., and they were doing it in the movie theater, and they were giving out discounts, and it was before the movie started, and they said, okay, text 1234 to whatever number, and you'll get your discount code and blah blah blah. And the failure was, well, what do you do when you go into a movie theater?
You turn your phone off.
You turn your phone off. So the
Yeah.
sample, for whatever reason, the theater that they sampled that worked great, because I guess that theater didn't tell people to turn their phones off. But when they launched it, it was a huge failure, right? But
Mhm.
you had to own it. and what do you do
Yeah.
differently? So
Yeah. And there had to be someone in that room that was like, I don't know about that. And
that ex-
again, it's speaking up in the workplace.
that's exactly what we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
And the need for, having that, psychological safety, environmental
Mhm.
psychological safety, where people can speak up and say, by the way, this is a mistake.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Run. Don't do that.
which is actually goes back to what we're talking about today, and hiring the right people, because I personally have one of those stories that I even talk about now, where I tried to put my hand up, got told don't put my hand up, and yeah, we had the Kodak commercial moment in the movie theaters. But now I use that story as, I should have pushed harder, I should have said something, I should have put my hand up regardless and said what I needed to say, because would have averted that situation. And now I use that as a story. And when we do that, when people do that through the hiring process, now you can see, okay, they don't just dwell on their failures, but rather, like, okay, they're making the place a better place with
Yeah.
that story.
They are. And it reminds me of, I tell people all the time, I now get paid to do the things I used to get in trouble for. I worked in a
Love it.
traditional corporate environment for years, and I have different views, and they're not traditional. And I got in trouble for them. But today, as a consultant, people pay me to come in with my unconditional views, and bring in ideas that they hadn't heard before, and to be a little wacky and be a little out there. And I think back, if that had been embraced earlier in my career, who knows where I could have been. But I really, just felt beat up for being different. And it took age and a little bit of confidence and a little bit of circumstance for me to go, you know what, let me just give me a try and see what happens. And yeah, and today I get paid to do the things I used to get in trouble for.
So we're talking about the interview process, and I like that part. I want to segue a little bit, but I still want to keep it on this interview.
Mhm.
What are your best advice for people who are, on the not the interviewee but the interviewer, in looking at candidates, and they're like, okay, this candidate nails everything.
Mhm.
All the resume is amazing, all the checks in the box are great. You just
Mhm.
there's something. What is your best advice? Because we've heard all these horror stories where someone shows up and they look amazing on paper, they nailed the interview, and they show up to get into the organization. It's a disaster. And someone who's like, I just had this feeling. What's your best advice for them out there?
I think one of the things that, if you have that feeling, is to spend more time with that candidate. We're trying to make hiring decisions quickly. We definitely don't want to do death by interview, because we can run off really good candidates if we have this insane process. But find a project that person could do, and then talk about it with them, because that starts to help you see how their brain would work with yours. And an example of that is one of my clients. They have a position that they hire for, from time to time, and this person is responsible for P&Ls, and they're responsible for this transportation organization. So we do the top grade interview that we had talked about, and if we feel good about their background, we give them kind of a made up P&L and say, tell us what you see. And then we give them a couple of scenarios, and we ask them to write us back and tell us how they'd handle a couple of things. And what that gets us to is we get to start to think about how they think about the work, not just in theory, but in actuality. It allows us to see their writing skills, their communication skills. But the most important part about it is when we stop and talk with it. So the person who would be managing that person talks to the candidate about what they see in the P&L. And so that candidate starts to say, well, this doesn't make sense to me. Tell me more about that. Or, there's two different ways I would go. How would you go? And again, it starts to build this conversation of how we might work together. And is that a match? And I think that's a great way to start to kind of, deal with those little butterflies in your stomach. Like, is this person too good to be true? Give them a project and sit down and have a great conversation with them about it, as if you were working together, and then see what comes out of that.
No, that's great advice for sure,
Mhm.
especially if you're in a technical realm where it's very
Mhm.
hands-on or
Yeah.
process oriented, planning
Mhm.
oriented, stuff like that, right? Because that really can see, you can really see it comes out really quickly.
Mhm.
Because if someone doesn't really know what they're doing, they're going to get flustered, frustrated very quickly, and then they're going to be
Yeah.
asking questions that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and we've given that the exact same project to probably 10 people over the last year, and we have gotten every kind of imaginable answer back. And there was one candidate in particular that we were pretty high on, and we thought this is the one. And through that process, we were like, no way, there's no way this is not going to work. He's not going to enjoy working for us. We're not going to, he's not a fit for it. It was just wasn't a fit on either side. And it could have been a really costly mistake for the organization, but also a costly mistake on that candidate because it would have, put a bump in their resume. And that's not fair to do to that candidate either. You have to protect your company, but you also have to protect the people and respect the people that you're interviewing and not put them in a place of failure.
That's a great point,
Mhm.
and if they're saying yes to you, that means they're saying no to someone else. And if
Yeah.
you realize that's not a great fit,
Mhm.
um, that then you're taking them away from another opportunity. And I think there's a lot of potential for respect there. Like, hey,
Mhm.
we think you're a great person. We love you. We just don't think you're a great fit for this role. If another opportunity pops up, feel free to apply. And
Mhm.
then, if I was on them, I'm like, what, I can respect that. Thanks for not putting me in a situation where I wouldn't want to be in the first place.
Every time someone changes jobs, they change the course of their life and the life of their family. And so when we hire people, we have to be responsible to that because that person is taking a chance on our company with their livelihood. And I don't think hiring managers pause and recognize what that power is.
Oh, mic drop moment. Jenn's in the house. I'm telling you, that is so true. All right, so let's blast through. So we've decided the position. We figured out the requirements. The capability we want to develop there, the vision for it. We've gone through the interview. We found the butterfly person. We said thanks, but no thanks. You might
Yep.
maybe next time. We found the right candidate. Drop them a letter of offer. We both sign it. Job's done. Right. That's
Yeah.
it. Or am I missing a step or
Yeah.
two?
Wouldn't that be great if that was it and you just like pick them up and like plugged them into their position and they knew everything and it was all fine? Wouldn't that be
Well,
great?
unfortunately, some people think that way.
Yeah, and then they wonder why it doesn't work out. Yeah. So, onboarding is obviously incredibly important. And, I look at onboarding probably a little different too. And how I look at onboarding is really thinking about prioritizing the work you want this person to do. So, if you've got 10 things for this person to do in their job, find the three most important things, not the easiest stuff to teach, the three most important things this person's going to be responsible for. Teach them that first. Let them get some wins, let them get some confidence. Then you add on additional responsibilities and then additional until they can handle the full job. The reason why you start with what's most important is that tells them unconsciously at the end of the day, this is the most important part of my job. It's what I learned first. It's where I had my early wins. It's how I built my confidence. And it's how I'm going to show up every day. And I'm going to be able to prioritize in a different way. Instead of you just saying, here's a buffet of 10 things, have at it. And when we start to build confidence in our employees early on, we open up their ability to use their frontal lobes. And so they can learn faster. But unfortunately, too often we just dump on people and we just hand them a bunch of stuff and then they struggle, then they get in trouble and then they don't have confidence. And then it starts to spiral from there and not a good way, not spiraling in a good way by any means. But you have to set people up where they immediately know their priorities and they immediately get some wins.
I love that
Mhm.
last bit. Immediately get some wins. Put
Mhm.
that confidence, get that confidence under belt. And you're right, that was not where I was expecting to go. But I love it. It's saying in the same
Mhm.
breath because build that person up because they show up, they get into their new job, they're nervous a little bit. New people, new building, maybe new login, who knows. Um, and it just new work, new flow, and all this stuff, and new dynamics, and all this, and just like getting into the groove and getting into the routine, and get some wins under their belt. Some pats on the back, saying "Good job, thanks for taking care of that for us." All right, the next one up is such and such a file, and just having at it. That is, that's great because it makes them feel valued, and they're part of the team already. They're contributing and all these things. So,
Yeah.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And in that process, help them find their best partners. And
Right.
so when you're in a new job, oftentimes you're like, who am I supposed to be working with? And where do they work? And what's their extension? And who is that? And I don't even know. And so part of the onboarding is teaching people who are your most important business partners. And so here's the first 3 tasks I want you to learn. And here are the 3 people that you need to talk to and talk about your relationship with how you'll work with them to get that task completed, and encouraging, your current employees to really take those new people under their wings so that it becomes this culture of we succeed together. But part of the onboarding plan has to be, here are the people you'll work with, and here is your time to learn how to work with them.
No, I love it. I
Mhm.
absolutely love it. And especially the last part, here's how to work with them. Because again, that's something that we just don't really know, nor do we get taught it, nor do we talk about it that much, is that working with me is different than working with you. And the thing, how I receive information and process information is differently than how you do. And as a leader, as a boss, a supervisor, not boss, supervisor, um, I find it important that when I show up, so for example, my current role, I have 4 direct reports and a team of 24 people right now.
Mhm.
And so my director is like, hey, this is how I like to receive, my information or whatever. Here are things that I like, to do, or this is how I like to operate. But at the same token, I need to know how that works for you so that when information is going your direction, I can make sure that you understand it because I'm giving it to you in the way that you need to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you go back to thinking about how to give people early wins, knowing who to work with and how to work with them, that'll get them early wins. Because how many people in their first, couple months sit at a desk and think, I don't know who to even call for help, and I'm just going to do my best. And you have to remove that noise in someone's head so that they can spend their energy, because we only get so much energy every day. So it's a currency. If they're spending their currency, that energy, on trying to figure out who to work with to solve the job they need to do, then they're not getting it done. And take away those obstacles so all of their energy is spent actually getting the wins.
Which I would even suggest would be a massive drain on a creative person or a person who's
Mhm.
put in a creative role because they need that
Yeah.
energy, that currency, as you called it,
Mhm.
for that actual type of work because it takes a lot as it
Yeah.
is. Right? It
Mhm.
takes a lot of work, to a lot of a lot of energy and time and brain power to be creative. Lord knows it does for me because I'm not necessarily the most creative person out there. So
Yeah. Well, and you think about double work. You think about someone goes down a path and they think it's the right path, but they didn't know the right person to partner with. And now that person maybe is mad because a new person didn't include them in a conversation. And now the work's wrong. And now, now you've got noise again, right? You've got all this noise. And that person feels like they failed. And now they have a bad relationship with a business partner. And it could have been prevented. It's actually not hard. It's not hard at all, but it's slowing down to do the right things for the right reasons to create wins and success so people can build their confidence so that they can bring their best selves to the job and deliver what you expect them to deliver.
beautiful. So I'm going to sum this up pretty quick. Basically, when you get people in, obviously teach them what they need to do, but actually prioritize, the top 3 tasks that you want them to achieve right away so that they get those quick wins. But most importantly, make sure they are linked with the key people out there that they need to interact with in order to get those quick wins in. And make sure that we have an understanding of, everyone has an understanding how to send and receive information so that, lines of communication are nice and clear and open and crisp and life goes good.
That's right.
All right, so there's one thing I want to hit before we end this show, Jen, And we've gone through the whole hiring process, right from, think about the position up to onboarding. And that is, end of the day, we all leave. So I'd love to get
Mhm.
your thoughts and ideas on, how do we take care of people who are leaving? Someone walks in and submits their 14-day notice or whatever, their resignation and stuff. Do we like go what the hell and throw it back at them and like get the hell out and pack up your things now, or do we sit here and cry and say no, please don't go, no, we need you? How
Yeah.
do we take care of that situation?
The first thing we have to do is stop and pause and find out why. And too often we take it so personal that we can't hear the why. And that's what we've got to know. We've got to know the why. Because if it's a why you can control and you can course correct and it's someone you need to keep, maybe that's an option. If there's a why and you can't save that person, but you discover something about your organization and you're like, oh, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And, stop and really get curious without ego. And that's really hard, but we can do it. Because if you remove your ego from it and you really listen to that person's why, you will have a much more, you have more respect for them, more empathy for them. Those people that we treat poorly on the way out, you don't think they don't know people. You don't think someone's going to apply for a job that you really want to hire, but went to college with that person that you were really horrible to. And they're going to call and be like, hey, what was it like to work there? Should I apply? They're going to remember that last period. They're not going to remember all the years leading up to that. And so it's a good strategy to treat people well. It's the right thing to do. And it's an incredibly important piece to maintaining your retention in the future by really finding out the why and respecting that person's why. I will talk to people and they're like, yeah, they gave notice and they think that they can go off and do this and there's no way they can do it. Well, you don't know that. Applaud them for, having the confidence to try something new. Because while you're walking around the office talking bad about that person who left, every single person you said something's going to be like, oh, they probably think that about me too. And again, you're reducing that safety in the workplace. And so you have to be really careful about how you treat those people, but use it as a moment to get curious, find out the why, be respectful of the why. And if there's anything in that why that you can change, change it.
Love it. I love that. If
Mhm.
there's anything that you can control and change it.
Mhm.
I was actually having this exact conversation with a member of our Facebook group, Leadership Skills for
Mhm.
Managers to be Leaders, Not Bosses. And if you're not a member, for the listener out there, easy, just go to movingforwardleadership.com/group and join the over 3,000, probably about 4,000 by the time this goes live, members who are having conversations in there daily. And we're having this conversation where a leader was having issues with their team, and I asked a handful of questions, and she mentioned that so there were people who were leaving. I said, okay, so have you asked why that they were leaving? So some said they were going for more money,
Mhm.
which is not uncommon,
Someone will
and some
always pay
people,
you more.
right, you can't control that. Most people, who not everyone listens to the podcast, has control over payroll.
Mhm.
So if you don't have control over payroll, you can't control it. But the other aspect was, said some people didn't like who they were working with. I'm like, bingo. That's where you focus in on.
Yeah.
Why is it they don't like it? Now, are there some people in there that are causing issues for the new people that are showing up? They're causing issues with the rest of their teammates. Obviously, there's something there. As you said, there's a little bit of smoke, and where there's smoke, there's
Mhm.
flames, right? So that's where I suggested this member to, focus her attention on and go after, because if there's one or two people who are causing issues for the other 20, you don't want that. You need to get after that and sort it out. Find out what their issue is. Why are they causing problems?
Right. And
The
those
other thing
people, oh, sorry, people who left for more money might have only be leaving for more money because they didn't like their boss. So they were looking for a job. And guess what? Someone offered them more money. But if they love that supervisor, they may not have been out there looking and probably wouldn't have been offered more money. So chances are the more money was related to that too.
great point. Great point.
Mhm.
Um, the other point I want to make was you talked about respecting people as they go out and stuff like this. You always want a friend in court, right?
Mm.
And like you said, people talk when they get outside of work. So it's like, hey, hell no, you don't want to go work for McCarthy Inc. That
Oh,
guy's
oh,
crazy. Like he treats you like garbage. You want to go over to 304, yo, because Jenn is phenomenal, right? But if you know, if my former employee is working for you, and then suddenly something pops up on your end, it's like, oh, we need to partner someone with, we need to partner with someone to handle this. Anyone got any ideas? Anyone got any suggestions? And if I was, supportive, respectful, et cetera, et cetera, et
mhm.
cetera, more likely my former employees go, yeah, check out McCarthy. You know what?
Yeah.
Great guy. You know, you guys have similar lanes, et cetera. There are some overlaps and some non-overlaps and stuff. You might complement each other very well. It's like, can you set up a meeting? Sure, I can set up a meeting. I still talk to him,
Yep.
right? And boom, now business is booming and we're helping each other.
Yeah. It is interesting. People have to change jobs for so many reasons. And when you build that, when you've treated them well and they have to leave for whatever, and you stay in contact with them and you stay in communication with them, who knows what will happen down the road. You may do business with them, they may come back, they may refer someone, you may refer someone to them. But those relationships, when we kind of, spend all these time, maybe years building relationships with someone, and then overnight you stomp it out for no reason, like that's just, people are going to remember it.
Awesome. Jenn, I could talk to you for hours.
I know we have so much fun together.
We do. We have so much fun. But unfortunately, we're going to wind this one down.
Okay.
However, we do got lots of great comments going on the social feeds with the live video. So for the listener, again, if you're not following me on social, you need to, because this is actually being live streamed months before the podcast is even being released. So you get ahead, you get access to these great interviews ahead of time, such as the one with Jenn tonight. But Jenn, before we wrap up, we're going to end the show like we did it last time. So we're going to review answers. First question before we wrap up. According to you, Jenn Thornton, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is someone who can reduce the fear in the workplace and allow someone to be wholly and completely who they are.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I think very fitting for this day and age right now with
Absolutely.
all the change that's going on and the social dynamics of the world right now. So
Yeah.
fantastic. And the final question of the show, where can people find you? How can they follow you? Shameless plugs. Have at it.
Yeah. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Jenn Thornton, ACC. You can also connect with us on our website at 304coaching.com, where we have a ton of resources that you can download and enjoy and find podcasts like this one.
Amazing. And for the listeners, always, it is easy for you. Go to movingforwardleadership.com/187. 187. Links are in the show notes. Jenn, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time and this friendship that we have going on.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yes. I appreciate you. And I hope you and all your followers have a fantastic evening.